Beauty. Welcome to MakeupClasses.com. Hi, everybody over at Facebook. Welcome to MakeupClasses.com. Yes, you guessed it, by the height of my hair. Today, guys, we're going to be talking about the 1980s. Is this not like the craziest hair ever? But that's what they did. That's what we did. We teased our hair. Big hair was in, right? Everything, go big or go home. Welcome, welcome. If this is your first time joining me, I've been working on a series all of last week and this week on beauty and fashion of the decades. And today we are up to the 1980s. A lot of fun. So let's just recap yesterday on the 1970s, where we have an energy crisis. This is what's going on in the world. So inflation is high, interest rates are high, and unemployment is high here in the US. So fashion and beauty was very coveted. Whatever you owned, you took care of. It was made of quality. You appreciated it. It was also a time where people started really becoming more introverted, really focused on themselves. They call it the me decade, where that communal type of society is starting to break apart. We also have the huge emergence of credit cards, which will bring us into the 80s. 1980s, we had a lot of credit cards come into our life. So that really allowed people to spend money in the 70s, but interest rates were so high that we don't see as much of that as we do in the 80s and into the 90s. So let's move into the 80s. What is happening? Well, Jimmy Carter is out of the picture. We now have Ronald Reagan, who was voted in he was president from 81 to 89. And he is known for, him and Alan Greenspan, of lowering interest rates, cutting taxes, and also breaking barriers with other countries and really merging a lot of our economics, working with other countries. So a lot of our manufacturing, actually, companies started to realize that they can go overseas and produce a lot cheaper. So goods were really available at a higher speed, at a higher rate in the 1980s. We have computers, right? This huge boom in electronics, in the computer industry. Our banking industry is becoming more savvy. So people now have more independence and more buying power. You had your hands on money. And if anybody who's lived through the 1980s can remember that that was a period of over-consumerism and overspending. People just started buying a lot of stuff. Kind of like the 1950s, it reemerges, right? The pendulum is always swinging in economics. It's always swinging in fashion design. It's always swinging in human psyche. That's just how we are as human beings. We're driven by fear and we're driven by pleasure. So whatever works for us in our mind is what's going to happen out in the world. So in the 1970s, with women especially, we start to have this sexual revolution, something that I didn't mention yesterday, but the sex industry, pornography, sex shops, nightclubs started to emerge, and women were really starting to find their sexual independence as something that is slowly starting to be accepted. And we really start to see that in the 80s, especially in movies and TV shows, where women are really breaking out of their shell. Their characters are becoming stronger. They're becoming more over-sexualized. They are starting to really show their feminine power. And we start to see that in clothing as well. More women are entering the workforce. So we see these, what we call power suits. We also start to see coordinates. I don't know if some of you remember that word in 80s fashion, where outfits were very, they were put together with strategy and intent. You went to work, if you worked in a corporate setting and you wanted to climb the ranks, you wanted to climb that ladder, ladies. So you really focused on these power outfits. All right, let's talk about fashion for a little bit. It was very colorful. In the 1970s, we start to see nostalgia be brought into clothing design, especially within the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. We see a lot of Art Deco in our jewelry and also our fashion designs in the 1970s. So since that, swinging back with fashion is working in the 70s, in the 1980s, designers say, hey, you know what, if it worked in the 70s, it's going to work again. And that's where we kind of get that phrase, that cliche of all of fashion has been done. 1980s really starts to focus on that, bringing back different styles or different lines, different colors from different time periods and meshing them together, incorporating them into one big mix. So it becomes, like all these little ingredients into this one big fashion recipe. So we start to see the shoulder pads of the 1930s in a neon color. With pants, pants were big in the 80s. We really, girls, right? We wanted to still work our way up in corporate, and we were going to compete with men in the workforce. So pants were very popular. Jeans, ripped clothes, that was unheard of, really. I mean, who was going to rip their clothes in the 1970s when money was so tight, right? You wanted to take care of your clothes. You were handing them down. Back in the 30s, during the Depression, we were mending, we were tailoring our clothing, we were taking care of what we have. So now in the 80s, with this abundance, I guess, or this feeling of abundance of, money, consumerism, the stock market's doing well, we're tearing our clothes. It's again, there's a lot of psychology behind design and fashion. Everything that's happening in the world is affecting us. It's what we see. It's our advertising. It's our movies that we're watching, television that we're watching. All of these are influencing music. MTV emerges, right? All of these things are influencing our style and our makeup and our hair. So hair, so again, like fashion, so many things taken from other time periods, incorporated into the 1980s. So curly hair, permed hair, really in style, big hair. Okay, teasing hair, that was really big in the 60s, right? Teasing, that whole bouffant. So we bring that into the mix. Perms, I think I just said that. Asymmetrical haircuts, hair dye, really big, especially, that punk rock brought in different hair colors. Now we're seeing that again reemerge. So a lot of like funky hair colors, mullets were in, that just came to mind. Anything with a lot of layering and a lot of movement in the hair as well. Hot tools were used, especially if you had bangs. You would curl your bangs and tease and stack them in the front as well. If you guys have some photos of yourself from the 1980s or any time period and you'd like to post them on MakeupClasses.com, Facebook, please do so. Also, my Makeup Classes Facebook group, you could post on there as well. So we have some group members over there that would just love to see some fashion photos. So if you have anything, please feel free to post it. It's just a lot of fun and we all learn from each other. And with the 80s, I have to say, not one of my favorite time periods. Again, I was looking through my closet. I don't like shoulder pads. I don't like that militant look, which again, that strong female persona in the 80s was huge. It was everything. More women were entering the workforce. So you had a lot of working moms, and they wanted to feel powerful. So the clothing definitely emulates power as well. So I don't really have a lot of 1980 clothes. Neon was big. Not a real fan of neon. Even in the 80s as a child, I don't think I really liked the fashion that much. Deep in my heart, I was more of like a 70s child. Although I did love Madonna, and I loved all her layering of jewelry, the more, the better. Again, 80s, and please, I don't mean to offend anyone, but in a way it could be characterized, the fashion and hair and makeup could be characterized as very obnoxious. Again, go big or go home. So you had tons of bracelets and necklaces and big earrings and big hair. And, we swing from that. We really, project that me decade. We really push that into the 80s. And because of the strong financial element in the 1980s, we become more of a me culture, more of a me psychologically. That's probably why I just didn't really like the 80s. I'm not just not a big fan. Maybe it has to do with that psychology of everything has to be bigger and better and me and just obnoxious, just not really into the style at all. Love me some 70s. Love the 70s music also. 80s music was a lot of fun. Again, we have MTV, which is huge. Cable TV really starts to take off in the 70s and has a huge boom in the 80s. Probably everybody in America had cable television. So we see a lot of influence on our TV screen, to say the least. All right. So hair was big. If it was short, it was cut in a lot of layers. It had a lot of asymmetrical value to it. Also, another thing that girls did, they would take a scrunchie. Do you guys remember this? And you would put like a scrunchie headband, and you would do like this high ponytail like that. Yeah, I definitely did that when I went to school. It was just easy. Throw it up. There we go. And actually, this look was pretty easy to do. I just hit my hair with with a curling iron really fast, tease, put some amplifying product in, and wow, it got really big. Hairspray was huge in the 80s. Again, bigger, better. I can't emphasize that enough. All right. So makeup of the 1980s goes along with the hair and the fashion. I guess, when I look, and again, this is just my opinion, when I was looking at photos of the 80s, between the hair, the makeup, and the clothing, my eye just didn't know where to go. It didn't know where to focus because everything was so eye-catching. And I really feel like in fashion and hair and makeup that when everything is pulling your attention, you don't know where to look. You don't know where to start. And that kind of captures the essence of the 1980s, where you just didn't know where to look at the person. And I also feel like when I was looking at those pictures from, through a female lens, through almost like a spiritual lens, I didn't see the person. I saw the stuff. I saw the hair. I saw the makeup. I saw the fashion. And the female really got hidden, really got sucked into the hair, the makeup, and the fashion. And perhaps that is the psyche of the 1980s, where we got sucked into all of this consumerism. Now, I'm all for capitalism. I think capitalism is great, because the true definition of capitalism is where we have a deregulation of government. Government kind of steps out. Businesses regulate themselves. They manage their own money. They take care of themselves. And I love that. I love, excuse me, the responsibility part of capitalism. And I think where we go wrong in our mind and our psyche when it comes to capitalism is we associate capitalism equals greed. Greed is a moral issue. It's not an economic issue. Well, morals and economics, they do kind of, they are hand in hand. But that's where capitalism goes wrong. When the moral compass just is completely out of whack and we become super greedy. And I think that's why I really can't get with, and again, I'm talking personal, I really can't get with the 80s attitude of more is better, be obnoxious, look at me, look at what I'm wearing, don't look at the person that I am, look at how much hair and makeup and clothing I have. And it almost becomes a mask on women and men, especially, women especially. We really get sucked in. More beauty magazines, more advice on how to better ourselves, because advertisers from the beginning of the 20th century, we are told that we are not enough. And we really believe that. Women believe that we are not enough and that we need to make purchases and do things to ourselves to make us more. Well, I'm here to tell you at MakeupClasses.com, you are enough. Enjoy your beauty, embrace your beauty, have fun with it. But don't be greedy. It's just, greedy is not pretty. There we go. So, and I guess maybe that's why I wasn't, again, I'm sorry if I'm a Debbie Downer on the 1980s, but I love to study psychology and I love economics and finances. And one of the things that I notice is that the moral compass is kind of thrown to the side and it's all about more. All right. So speaking of more eyebrows, the more eyebrow you had, we had beautiful Brooke Shields who had very bushy. The untamed eyebrow was in. Again, I don't have that look personally, but I'm going to achieve it by just drawing it in with some pencil, just making my brows thicker. I have a hard time doing this on myself. I'm like, oh, I want to groom my eyebrows. It's really amazing how psychology and beauty really are one. It's how you perceive yourself, how you think about yourself, what style and what look resonates with you. It's just, that's one thing I've learned on this journey with you guys, is what I really love and what I don't love. And by studying the history and what's going on the planet, it really starts to make sense to me of why I like certain things and because of the meaning behind it. I don't like that military style, that stern female look, because I'm not a stern female. I like to have a lot of fun and be really playful. So that's not my style. So these are questions that you could ask yourself, who are you? What style do you resonate with in your heart? What do you like? What do you love? What do you like in makeup? And that's what we're going to start to see more and more as we go into the 90s and also the 2000s, where women start discovering, especially now, right, in the pandemic, we're starting to discover what we really love. Okay, so I put some foundation on, heavy brow, eyeshadow. This is where the fun begins. Eyeshadow was very layered, a lot of color, a lot of color. It was big. I'm just using like a maroonish color. All colors were pushed, same in fashion. You saw everything from pastel to dark colors, black in fashion, white in fashion, really anything went. Same with makeup. A lot of your brights. So I'm going to use some of this bright bubblegum pink. I'm trying to do this really fast so you get just an idea, just a glimpse of what an 80s look would be. I know my videos, these tend to be a little long because I love to talk about the history. I love to talk about American history and fashion. Yeah, see already, oh, I try to clean it up and make it neat. But really, I shouldn't be doing that. I should just let it go and let it get big. But I want to tame it down. Dawn wants to tame it down because it's just too much for me. All right. So another thing that we see in 80s eyeshadow is eyeshadow that is now extending out. This was something new and different. I guess it started in 70s punk, where eyeshadow was coming out of the edges, out of the lines. Coloring outside the lines was very popular. So we'll just put some purple out here. Let's do over here on the other side. So I've got some reddish tone, some pink. Now I'm going to add some purple. Fashion shows emulated a lot of these looks, and that's where we got our looks. Beauty magazines, covers of magazines. Also, another big thing that was really hot were designer labels that were actually visible on clothing, like your Jordache jeans and your Sassoon jeans, Gloria Vanderbilt, any type of branding, Lacoste. If you had your labels visible, you were telling the world basically how much you spent on clothing and showing the world what class you were in. That was another thing that I was reading about, how fashion really divided class. If you had designer clothing, obviously you were in an upper class, upper middle class. Basically, you were able to afford these things. But we had credit cards, so not necessarily. You might not have been able to afford things. Your family might not have been able to afford things, but you were putting it on credit. So you looked like you had all of these things, but not necessarily. So it was all about the look in the 80s. It was all about the image. Here's some highlighter I'm going to put under the brow as well. Soap operas were really popular as well. Evening soap operas, that glamour and glitz of those types of shows really resonated with a lot of women, and we emulated them and we wanted to be like them. Having a lot of fun with the shadow. So the more shadow, the more color, the more layers, the better. Just putting a little bit of some shimmer on the inside. Another thing that we see is eyeshadow on the bottom. Women were taking, and men too, eyeshadow on the bottom lid. Am I getting more 80s like for you? I hope so. I think I am. I think this is coming out okay. It's looking 80s like. Lashes really disappeared in the 70s, and they disappeared too, believe it or not. I was kind of surprised when I thought about it. I didn't know of anybody in the 80s that wore fake lashes. So they kind of disappeared for a while, for about 20 years, and then they reemerged, of course, in the 90s and 2000s, that sort of thing. And especially now, right? But we'll get there. So a lot of mascara. Oh, also liner. Liner was big. I have some blue liner, colored liners. I mean, everything was out there. Every color, every type of product, cream, um, gels, glosses, every formula has pretty much started to emerge in the 80s. You could get any color. Again, it goes back to our economics and our finances and, these broken down barriers with other countries. I mean, we see the fall of the Berlin Wall. The communism is starting to fall apart in the world, and trade is just increasing. And companies are starting to move overseas and experiencing cheaper costs on labor and goods. So we have more available to us in the 1980s for sure. All right, so we're going to use a lot of mascara in the 80s. A lot. Preferably black, although we did have brown mascara, but black mascara, no matter what your hair color was, no matter what your preference was, black mascara was all the rage. And again, if you were going to work, you were suiting up. You were suiting up for that corporate environment. You wanted that power hair, that power face, the power suit, the perfect coordinates. You really were pulling this entire look together. Women were also over-sexualized in the 80s as well. So again, it's like that juxtaposition. We want that power. We want to be seen. We want to be respected. And we also want to be loved and be seen as sex objects. And we see a lot of that in our movies in the 80s as well. Blush. Blush was all the rage in the 80s. I don't think there was a time, well, the 20s, it was big. It was all over the face, right? If you saw my 1920s video, blush was still, it was angled. It was precisely placed, but a lot of it. So I'm using this bubblegum pink type of blush, and it was really high on the cheekbones, and it was cheeky, and it was all the way through. It was all the way through. When I think of makeup like this, I think of very theatrical makeup, right? But this was the look. A lot of product. How many times have I said the word a lot today? Or big. So there we go. And finally, lip color. Well, we had two schools of thought. If you wore a lighter lip, you wore a really dark lip pencil, outlined your lip super, super dark, and used a lighter color on the interior, which, by the way, I kind of like. Yeah, that's one thing from the 80s I do like. I know we all have our tastes. We all like what we like, but I do like that look. Or you wore a very deep color. So to go with all of that purple and pink, I chose a very deep purple. So dark lips were in, red lips were in. Did red lip really ever go out of fashion? I guess in the 70s, we don't see a lot of red lip. We did in the beginning. We saw the raspberries and the maroon colors kind of softened and muted. But red, I think, is really that timeless color, right? So a lot of dark color. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's 1980s makeup, hair, and fashion lesson. Of course, go online, do your own research, read about different time periods. It's so much fun. If this is something that you're interested in, do some research. I guarantee you, you will get totally sucked into it. It's just so fascinating. There are some days when I'm researching for this show, this segment, I am reading for like 8 hours straight. I love it. I love it. So I try to spew out as much information as I possibly can. Hopefully you learned something from it. Please let me know. Drop me a note if you like these videos, if you got anything of value out of it. I would love to know. Tomorrow, 1990s. Let's see where the 80s brings us. Can we come out of the 80s safely without damaging our hair? I don't know. Maybe. Well, you guys have a great day. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being a fan. Please go onto my YouTube channel and subscribe also. All right, guys, have a great day. Thank you so much. Namaste. Thank you. Bye, guys.